So today, what we're building is a machine that won't be used for gaming, although it could be if you threw a graphics card on it. But we're going to use the built-in video or the built-in graphics on the i7 9700K CPU with 16 gigs of RAM, which is only like $60 now. For
Yeah,
this
good value.
2400 speed, which is plenty for what we're using the computer for. We've got the value in SSDs right now, in my opinion, which is the Intel 660p, 2 terabyte. This sells for about $200, and it'll get you about 2,000 megabyte read per second, read or write on that. A standard DVD reader-writer, because the person that is getting this computer still needs that. We're going to power it with probably one of the least expensive, best power supplies you can buy for the money, which is the EVGA 650W that you see here. It's not modular. It's like $54. It's a 2-year warranty. Now, EVGA has higher tiered and more expensive and better warranty power supplies, but we determined for this build that should be plenty. It'll be fine. Of course, to cool it all down, to keep the CPU cool, we're sticking with the tried and true Mugen 5. I'm glad to see these are back in stock everywhere. They're about $49 right now, and it'll fit pretty much every Intel and AMD socket out there that's available today, and some from years past. So if you've got something from years past that you want to see if that's compatible with, you just look up the specs and see the socket compatibility types. There's a lot of them.
You forgot to mention our tried and true Corsair here.
That's right. So the Corsair 200R is this black case you see me work on constantly. I find that Corsair was really had a unique place in the market in offering something for non-gamers or people who want something that isn't going to look gaudy or embarrassing in a few years' time. With all the RGB lighting and glass panels and extreme paint jobs, I kind of feel like this is a fad that people are going to really be embarrassed about in the years ahead. So this is a tried and true timeless computer case which can hold everything, as far as I'm concerned, that all the other cases can, except as far as liquid cooling, you could only use like a single 140 millimeter cooler back here. There's not enough room at the top for liquid cooling. So I won't use this on a liquid cooled build for that reason. It's not well designed for that. But for all my business clients or people who are using their computers to make money, to earn a living, and to get work done, this is the case of choice. And unfortunately, it seems Corsair has stopped making this case. They're still available for sale. They're about $75 right now, and when the inventory runs out, they're all gone. Yeah, let's get the side panels off of there so that we can not have anything in our way.
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, let me put you.
Okay.
In fact, let me have you step around so they can watch what you're doing. And I'll get this little shoe out, this little door stop, and we'll jam it in there so that that case doesn't move.
Pull towards you.
There you go. Thank you. Just set it down over here.
Give that to you. All right.
All right, now I want to remove that shoe so you can spin that around. Get that little cardboard box out of there.
Oh, yes.
That's got all of our mounting hardware and screws for items designed to go in that case. You know how that comes out?
Is it this way? Yeah.
Yeah, you can take it out that way. There's a little tab you've got to pull on, just like if it was a hard drive. You remember how hard drives mount in here? There's this little tab right here.
Oh, yes.
So if you pull on this tab and then slide it out, see there's little holes in the side of the box that hold it in so it doesn't move around in shipping.
Okay.
And then if we open this up, I'm on the delayed feed here, so I got to change that. Go ahead and just go dump that on the counter. And check the inside of the box, make sure you got everything out of it, please. There we go, there's the live feed there. So the only thing to prepping the case is going to be the optical drive, the power supply, and maybe a back plate, but I think that motherboard has a built-in back plate. We'll find out here in a minute.
So getting this out is very easy. Don't take a screwdriver and you'll scratch the case. It's very easy to pop that out.
Show us.
Okay. Are there tabs back there? Or you just
Yeah,
pop
there's
it?
tabs, but you can just push it straight. He's just reaching in the case and pushing it out that way.
Straight.
And then just put that with the rest of the spare parts if you would, please. And then the optical drive is going to come in from the front. Anything that's exposed from the front gets installed from the front. You don't install it from inside, you install it from outside. Installing this is quite simple. I'll allow Mitch to demonstrate.
Toolless, which is beautiful.
Yep, no screwdriver or pliers, nothing's needed. He's going to slide that in there, and there's a little catch right here, and it's going to lock into 2 of the holes on the side. And sometimes if it struggles, you can kind of pull back, and it should
click.
find, yeah, when the hole lines up with the peg, it should sort of fall in there. So you see how it keeps sliding back and forth? Right about there should be lining up.
Ah,
And it just required, this piece wasn't lined up perfectly. But now, it won't budge. And we'll still put a couple screws in there to lock it down because it's going to be shipped. If it was just, we're building it for the house, we wouldn't need to put the screws in because it's not going to go anywhere. So, all right, let me just get rid of that. Now the power supply. So in the box for the power supply, we've got the documentation, power cord, which can go,
We'll need that later.
well, we're not going to use this one. I like to keep this nicely folded for the customer. Oh, it smells like paint. And then we've got the screws, everything else empty. So there's our power supply. Now, we can use either the screws that came with the case to install the power supply to secure it, or the screws that come with the power supply. I like the screws that come with the power supply. They're a bit bigger, sturdier. The only time I don't use the power supply screws is if they don't match the paint color of the case. But in this example, we have black screws and a black case, so we will use these screws. We will install the power supply with this fan facing down. It's going to suck air in from the bottom of the case. There's a filter down here. So I'm just going to set the power supply in. It goes underneath this metal tab. And I want to get it flush up against the motherboard tray and then slide it fully back. And then we'll just put these 4 screws in, 1 in each corner. They go a little off from the corners. I'll just do this real quick. They go just a little bit away from the corners. So this one goes down here. Are we picking that up? Yeah. This one will go right here. This one will go right down here. Sometimes you may have to, this is why I don't tighten the screws, you may have to make some adjustment. And then the top one is going to go about 1 inch away from the corner. Now that all the screws have been started, I can lock them all down. This is a Milwaukee M4 cordless screwdriver that has a clutch on it, and the screwdriver will turn itself off when it hits the setting, which I have got now on the number 3 on this clutch up here. And that indicates to me that all the screws are tightened to a spec that I find to be not too tight, not too loose, except on the power supply. Because of the weight of the power supply, I want to make sure those screws are given an extra half a turn or so. If that power supply breaks loose in shipping, it will potentially destroy the entire innards of the computer as it gets picked up, the box gets picked up and dropped by the delivery people or moved from one truck to another. So that is not something I toy with. That's got to be good and secure in there because of its weight and size.
And installing it was just that easy.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much preps the case. We can take the, we can take this wire tie off of here. This is all of our front port umbilicals, which controls the front power switch, reset switch, the USB connectors, the headphone and speaker jack. We don't want to leave any wire ties in the system because they're made of wire, they get brittle, they break off in time, and then you have a piece of metal floating around. And it's only a matter of time before it gets behind your motherboard, shorts something out, and then it becomes bad times.
AORUS? How do you pronounce it?
What?
How do you pronounce it?
AORUS?
AORUS. Z390.
You're an AORUS.
Yeah, Z390 Pro Wi-Fi.
Just chuck it. And we need that plastic off of the I/O shield.
Oh, yes.
It's like wrapped in saran wrap. All right.
I'm really liking these built-in I/O shields. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that every
yeah.
motherboard should be that way.
Yeah.
It's certainly
Clean.
removes
Look at that. Yeah. The
some
chance
of
of bending them.
some of the difficulty in building is removed. One less mistake to be made, or sometimes an area where people get frustrated, or you'll see people who haven't done it before. I think even you struggled with it, Mitch. The first
I did,
time
yeah.
you did it.
I bent mine. Yeah.
And we're talking about here is this piece is built on the board, and most boards, this piece is separate. It goes into the rectangular spot back here, right in here. And sometimes it can be a tight fit to get all four corners. You pop one corner in, the other corner comes out. It's no big deal for me because I've been doing it for such a long time. But for a first-time builder, that can be one of the parts they spend the most time on. Something that simple that doesn't require any tools or screws. It just fits in there with friction, and some people really struggle with it and get frustrated.
Now, did you want to put the M.2? What are your thoughts on that first?
I would put the
CPU?
M.2 drive in first.
Okay.
All right, so Mitch has got the storage drive there, okay? Yeah. I think that's the best value in storage right now. 2 terabytes, $200. And it's NVMe, so you'd be hard pressed to even get regular SATA at that capacity for that price, at a quarter of the speed. It's certainly not the fastest NVMe drive, but it's half the price of the fastest NVMe drive.
Ooh.
So that's all packing material that can all just be chucked.
And there it is.
Yeah, and that's the $200 piece right there. Now, before you take it out of its plastic, we need to decide where we're going to put that on the motherboard. So looking down on the motherboard, you see we've got 2 places it can go. There's this one up here and this one down here. Now, me personally, I like to leave this one available because when this is mounted in the case and there's a bunch of stuff up here, especially the big heatsink we're going to put on,
Okay.
it can get in the way of accessing this. So if we do it now, then if the customer wants to add more storage later, they can easily just remove one screw and add it very simply. But Mitch, you need to take that screw out right there. That's going to hold this heat shield in place. Not all motherboards have heat shields, and they're not entirely necessary. But if an SSD gets really hot, it'll start to slow down until it cools off.
Good to have a magnetized screwdriver. Which is this one, magnetized?
And the magnetism may have worn off of it.
We gently lift this up and out.
Yep.
And as you can see, here there is a thermal pad
With tape on it.
with tape on it right here.
And if you leave the tape on it,
Very bad.
yeah, and you're defeating the whole point of it. The tape is there to keep it clean.
Right. But
until
we won't
it's-
take that tape off quite yet.
Not yet.
We'll set this aside. And this packaging always comes with little things to, don't bend it this way.
Well, hold on, we're getting a step ahead of ourselves, because if you look underneath, there's no standoff that's been placed in either of the 3 mounting holes for
Right.
different size SSDs. We want it in 80.
Ah, yes.
So that means in the motherboard box, there's going to be a small baggie with a standoff and probably another small baggie with a tiny little screw. Ah, there's a standoff. Ah, all right. So we've got a standoff and a screw for one M.2 and a standoff and a screw for another. And we're only installing one, so the extra pair goes back in there for the customer. And the customer will get this. We'll get this box with all the parts we're not using when the customer gets the computer. There's still more parts in here we're going to use later, but there will be leftover parts, and the leftover parts are kept in here. You can go ahead and put that motherboard back up on there if you would. So in this bag, there's a standoff. Take that out of the bag and put it into position labeled 80 or 80.
There.
You can do it.
There you go. Like that.
And then you can take the screwdriver and you can, there's a little grooves cut out in the top
Oh,
of that
okay.
standoff so you can tighten it down. Perfect, thank you. So we're gonna open this up. I don't wear an anti-static strap because I don't handle the parts by their components or by their, like by the gold fingers. I keep I don't touch that. But if you watch the way I handle the components, you'll see that there's nowhere for static to go. And for that reason, I don't have to wear an anti-static strap. You can certainly wear one if you want to. There's no harm in it. It's not like it's going to be an issue if you choose to wear one. But these days, and with modern circuitry design, and of course, handling the parts correctly, it's really redundant. So that's our drive right there. You'll see one side of it's got sort of a half moon cut out. That's where the screw's going to go to secure it down right there. And then this side of it, like I said, that's the part we definitely don't want to touch. We can hold it by the sticker and by the back. We can hold it by the edges. What we don't want to do is make contact with anything gold. Stay away from the gold. Stay away from the silver. Don't touch anything gold or silver. So we're going to go right down in here. And this is going to slide in on an angle. Make sure I'm holding this correctly. There's a big camera in my way. There it is. Okay. And it kind of looks like a springboard.
Diving board, yep.
Yeah. And so what we'll do is in this other bag that we just pulled out of the motherboard box, there's a little teeny tiny screw by my pinky, if you can see it. And it's really super small. So I'm just going to gently hold that in position.
Have you got enough room? Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine. So in the meantime, that's all there is to installing the M.2 drive. That's 2 terabytes of NVMe storage. Now we can take the heat shield, we'll pull that protective cover off of it, and you'll see there's a tongue on it right here. And that's going to go into the groove. Don't have it touch your circuit board. The groove is above it and slightly recessed back. You're going to just kind of wiggle until you find it. There it is, it went in.
Yep.
And then just lower this gently on top until it lines up with the standoff that was already there. Now we'll grab the screw that we removed, right? And that looks like that on the end of the screwdriver. It's got a little shoulder on it.
Okay.
And then that'll go right back where we took it out of. It's very simple. It's just like adult Legos. And you're just going to turn that till it stops. That's it. It doesn't have to be super tight or anything. There's no issues there. And that installs our storage.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, nothing to it. And next, we can put the CPU in there. Our documentation and go faster sticker are inside there. Don't need the box. Don't need that, it's all just cardboard. And that's our $360 CPU right here. So we're gonna lift up the socket right here, push down in a way to bring that lever up, and that exposes the delicate socket underneath. And now we'll take the CPU out. You'll see there's a white triangle right here, painted on the board, and there's a gold triangle in one corner of the CPU, right there. Align those triangles, put one over the other one, set it in one side, just align it with the edge, and then gently let it go. And it sits a little recessed into that socket. When we bring this lid back down, this spring, this lever is going to have a lot of tension on it now, whereas before it was super loose. And I'm going to push down hard on it and latch it underneath the metal there, and this plastic lid's going to pop up all by itself. Now, it's important we hold on to this plastic lid. Your motherboard warranty requires that this is reinstalled in its place if you ever have to take the CPU out, or your warranty will not be valid ever for the rest of the life of the board, because you will have, as far as the manufacturer is concerned, damaged or put in jeopardy the delicate pins that that CPU is now pressed up against. And you would never send your motherboard back to the manufacturer with a $360 CPU in it, because they won't guarantee you'll get it back. So keep this little cover. Hopefully you'll never need it. So that installs storage and CPU. All that remains of motherboard prep is RAM, and then we'll put the CPU cooler on last. In fact, we might even just put the CPU cooler on after we mount the motherboard, because if you remember when we worked with this board before, I think you were with me, Mitch.
Yep.
It's got these two EPS power connectors. There's an 8-pin and a 4-pin. Usually boards have one or the other. This one has both. I'm pretty sure a power supply isn't going to provide us with both. So we're only going to use the 8-pin. Now on this board, I really don't think it matters which two RAM sockets you use as far as you separate, you skip a socket. So you can start here and skip this one and go here, or you can start here and skip this one and go there. You want to use every other RAM socket. So you can refer to your motherboard manual, as it does vary from one board manufacturer to another. And I'm going to just open all of these retention levers up so they stay clear and out of my way for the install. Here's our RAM, brand new in the box. So the way Corsair packages their RAM, you kind of have to put it upside down. It's a clamshell.
Okay.
One piece of plastic is like a Tupperware. One's over the other one.
Okay.
And so if you can see that lip right there, pull that off. And then the RAM just sits in here pretty gently.
Like,
it's pretty easy to just have it
do
fall
that,
out of there.
yeah.
Now, I don't want to touch anything gold, right? Any way I handle this is fine, as long as I don't touch the gold. And there is a little plastic over there, company branding.
Not critical if you don't take it
Doesn't
off,
matter.
but
But it's there and it bothers me.
yeah.
You'll see there's a notch. That means it'll only go in one way. It's not right in the center. It's off center for that reason. And for the sake of showing you guys at home, I'm going to start with the RAM module closest to me. Because if I put it in here, then you won't be able to see
the
me,
next one.
right? And then once I've rested it in there very gently without force, I've assured I've got it in the right way because the notch lines up. Then I use my thumbs and I push down one corner and then the other corner, and you will hear them click and see these retention levers automatically lock. I don't know if you can get that camera on a little bit of an angle, a little lower, and we'll see if they can see those retention levers move. And that's 8 gigs of RAM installed. We're going to repeat the exact same thing. Again, I'm going to remove the plastic because it bothers me. I like it when people don't remove the plastic, and then years later they sell their used hardware, and then I get it, and I get to peel the plastic off, and it's like brand new. Like, thanks for keeping it new for me, because I'm not going to keep it new for the next guy. Line that up, make sure it's in there straight, one corner, other corner, and then I will close the other retention levers, and that's 16 gigs of RAM installed. That's all there is to it. All right, so here's the box that the cooler comes in. This cooler is regularly $49 on Amazon at Newegg. And inside, they even give you a really nice screwdriver. This little black box contains all of the screws and parts, including that screwdriver. It's hard to believe there's a screwdriver in here. It's right there. I feel like a magician. Like, look how big this screwdriver is.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, how did that come out of that
That
tiny
box.
box? This is a great screwdriver. I mean, forget everything else. This is a good screwdriver. My only complaint is I wish the handle was just another inch bigger. But
is it magnetized?
oh yeah. Yeah. It's all ready to rock and roll. And then everything else in here, we're going to dump out right here. And make sure there's nothing else in the box, and we'll just get rid of it. So there's the documentation. Now there's still some other stuff in here, which I'll get to in a minute. Let's talk about this stuff down here. So this is the back plate. We have to use this. The back plate has foam pads on one side, and that's the side that's going to go towards the motherboard. So we are going to use this. Do you see these? They kind of look like parentheses. These brackets kind of shaped like a parenthesis.
Right.
These are for AMD sockets, so we're not going to use these. So, extra parts. There's straight ones. These are used for Intel, so we do need these. We need to be able to hold the fan on, and that's what these little wires are for. And they give us 2 extra ones if we want to add, at additional expense, as an option, another fan at the other side, which I never do, but that's what those are for. We're not using these. So 2 we use, 2 we don't. This is all parts for adding another fan, which we're not doing, so we don't use any of that. Scythe very generously gives us a lot of thermal compound. And then we've got the standoffs and the mounting screws for the brackets. So in here, the standoffs and the brackets can all be installed now before we put the board in. And we just will wait for the rest of the heatsink till after the board's in the case, because this little connector, if you move the camera, this little connector right down in here is going to be very difficult for me to reach if this big heatsink is over it, and then the case is wrapped around it.
Then
right?
you have to break out the forceps.
Then I have to break out a hacksaw.
Yeah.
No, then I usually have to take the motherboard back out.
Right.
So I've been learning the hard way, which is the way I typically learn, to start prepping this a little differently when I'm using a large heatsink like this. So you'll see we've got 2 different sizes of standoffs. There's these big ones and these little ones. Now these little ones are for the Intel Socket 2011. And so we can take those out. We want the tall ones. There's 4 of those. And then there are these 4 screws, and those are used to hold these brackets down, which connect to the opposite end of the top of the standoff. So I'll show you, it's really simple. In the meantime, what you see over here is a growing stack of parts that we would use for AMD or Socket 2011. It's all explained in the documentation, which covers, as you can see here, LGA 2011 and 2066 use the same. Flip this over. It's all just one page, by the way, for each set. 775, 1150, 51, 55, 56. That's what the X is for. Anything that starts with 115 on the Intel side, and then 1366, that uses all the same instructions. And then when it comes to AMD, it'll do at the top here AM2, AM2 plus, AM3, AM3 plus, AM4, FM1, FM2, FM2 plus. That's a lot. Now let me show you how easy this is to put on. I'm going to grab this bracket right here first. I want the foam out, and for socket 2011, I'm sorry, not 2011, we're on socket 1151. You'll see there's 3 holes in each corner. Forget these 2 holes in the middle. Right up in each little wing, there are 3 holes, and they're for different mounting points for AMD and Intel. We want the middle hole in each corner. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to step over here and pick the motherboard up so you can see behind it. You see how there's 3 screws that hold this metal plate in. And our CPU is just on the other side of that. That's all part of this CPU socket. So that's what creates that. And you see those 2 screws? And you see these 2 holes? Those are going to line up right over each other. Again, foam pads are going to go up against the circuit board. We don't want to put metal against metal. And I'm just going to hold that in place. Now, Mitch, if you take a step or two back, I want people to see how I'm holding the board. When I say I don't need to wear an anti-static strap, you don't see me touching anything silver. My hands are on plastic or my hands are on the edges. And even when I hold this in place, I will just use my thumb to hold onto an edge. And that will hold everything without worrying. If I had a static shock right now, there's nowhere that the static shock would go that would be harmful. In other words, the edge of the board wouldn't short anything out, or hitting this metal and having a static shock on this metal isn't going anywhere. Therefore, it would cause no harm. Now I'm going to grab a standoff here, and I'm going to come in from this side of it around the CPU. I'm going to pick one of the holes that surrounds it and make sure that it aligns with the center or the middle hole here. And I just want to turn it a couple times just to get it started.
Okay.
You don't want to turn it more than that, because I still need this to be really movable so it will align with another standoff in the opposite corner. If I put a standoff in each in opposite corners, then I don't need to hold this anymore with my fingers. It'll automatically stay locked in the right place for the remaining two standoffs. So again, we're going to go to the opposite corner, and this is where I kind of have to guide it to make sure it's going to go into that center hole. Are we seeing this? There it is. And people are like, wow, your hands are awfully close. It looks like I'm touching those little silver dots. I'm not touching them. And again, if you want to walk around with the camera a little bit there, Mitch, people can like come around towards me and see that. I want people to see the other side of my hand, because I'm not sure they can really understand that I am nowhere near touching that. And so all I need to do is align this so I can get this standoff started in that middle position. I think I got it.
And now you can let go.
And now I can do more than that. I can set this back down, and you can see where I put those two standoffs, right here and here. And I'll grab the other two, and now I don't have to worry about whether or not it aligns, because it has no choice but to align. And just give those each a couple of turns. It seemed to be off by some reason. Just it seems a little bit off. Did I get this? That's in the middle. That's in the middle. That one's in the middle. Okay. Normally it doesn't require any adjustment at all. It just fits. Now, I usually start these with my hands, but it looks like something's still not quite, it shouldn't be giving me a difficult time. This usually happens if I tighten the screw too much. One of the screws I probably put in too tight. So there's two ways I can fix this. The way I'm doing it, which is an effort in futility, or I can start backing off a couple of these screws to loosen that up, so it has a little more play, a little more wiggle. You remember I was talking about Murphy's Law? It's always the last one that gives you grief. And it's not making any sense, because everything looks perfect. So I'm going to take this with the screwdriver and see if it's just an angle of my hands. There it goes. It's not normally that difficult. And then I'm just going to start tightening down every opposite corner here. And I want that metal plate to be completely flush. You don't want to tighten down one side, because it could warp the plate to one direction. So we just start tightening the screws little by little, corner by corner, opposite corner. And it should prevent any warpage and give us a nice, flat, strong, secure back plate. Some coolers come with plastic back plates, which I'm not a fan of. Because in the desert out here in Phoenix where it's hot, that plastic over the course of 3 or 4 or 5 years starts to get brittle in most cases, in many cases. And brittle plastic is frustrating because you may do nothing wrong, it just starts to break on you through normal handling. So a big metal plate like that, I'm nice and secure in knowing.
And just like that, the back plate's installed.
So the back plate's on, now we can put these little brackets. Remember I talked about these brackets? And these go on, if you follow the direction of the lever, and we'll use those screws I was showing you earlier. With the included driver, you see that it's magnetized. Just get it started. And we're going to do the same thing over here. And then once they're started, they can be tightened down. So once this motherboard's installed and we've got this wiring hooked up here, the last thing I will do is put some thermal compound on the CPU. And then there's 2 holes, one here and one there. I didn't tighten this side down, did I? Yeah, you want those to be tight. Yeah, so there's a hole, one on this bracket and one on that bracket. And we're going to lower when we're ready, we'll lower the cooler on top and secure the cooler with those 2. And that's it, apart from plugging it into power. That's how easy that cooler is to put in, to install. And it gets to be time to put the motherboard into the case. So, the question is, it still might be difficult to reach that connector in that corner with that big plastic shroud over the I/O shield. I'm wondering if I shouldn't try and connect it now.
Or why don't you put the motherboard in? Oh,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
It might be in my benefit to take this cable management, or take this wire tie cable management, take this off and pull these cables out.
Okay.
Remember I said most power supplies only give you one 8-pin EPS connector, and to get more than that is usually a higher end power supply, which is what you would want if you were going down that road, if that's how you were going to use the computer, to overclock it. Wow, this even has the old Molex connectors on there. So that's our one power for the board. That'll be easy to get. This is power for a graphics card. Yeah, so that's our one EPS power connector, which is 2 4s or 1 8. And this board takes 1 8 and 1 4, 4-pin connector. So that limits your choices of power supplies. There's not many power supplies on the market that provide that. And as such, the prices are a lot higher. Anyway, I'm going to just run this cable back through. We'll go through there? No, guess I'll push it through there. Right? And then I'm going to lay this case flat. Now, if you look inside the case, Mitch, you see the standoffs are already pre-installed. Can you see where I'm flipping my fingers around here?
Yep.
There's 3 across the bottom, 3 across the middle, 3 across the top. If you're not using a standard ATX motherboard, you will have to move some of these around. But if you're building like you see me build with this particular motherboard in this particular case, Corsair has set this up so you don't have to make any modifications. This is the bottom of the case. This is the power supply down in the bottom. And what I'm aiming for is this hole right here. I want to make sure that all of these ports on the motherboard, figure out how I'm going to do this. This rectangular square, this rectangle has to line up with that rectangular hole. And so I want to get any cables out of my way. I don't want anything trapped underneath the board as I'm working. Normally I pick the motherboard up by the heatsink. That would be the way I would be picking this board up. But because if I put the heatsink in, it's hard for me to plug in the connector up in the corner. I've got to find a way to pick it up by the edges, hold it by, you know, this little heatsink here, bring it in, start to guide it in with those ports angled down. And I will just gently set it anywhere for right now. Make sure the cable's out of my way. And then again, grabbing it by the edges. Careful where I'm touching the board. I want it to align with the back. And then I'm going to need to push it. And it's got a little springiness to it. And there's a little post that'll come up through this middle hole from one of the standoffs that doesn't take a screw. And the reason it does that is to hold the board in place for you. So if I push it forward, there's a little post that came up through there. And now the rest of these holes should align with the standoffs behind the board, except, oh no. Gigabyte has followed the right specs now. Some of the Gigabyte boards have an extra hole between these two, which I have yet to see a case support, except for cases Gigabyte makes. Anyway, it's okay if you have a hole without a standoff, but you can't have a standoff without a hole.
Right.
Right? And ideally, you utilize all the holes. The engineers have placed them there for a reason. Whether or not you understand that reason is not important. If you want a computer to be reliable, build it right. Whether you understand how important it is or you don't is irrelevant to reality. And so I'm going to fill all those holes. We've got 9 holes, one of which is the post. So I'm going to need 8 screws, right? Because I can't put a screw in the 9th hole. That's just a post. Those screws came with the case. They're in these little bags that we brought out. And remember that cardboard box you took out of the hard drive bay of the case? And we want these, there's 2 sets. One is a fine thread and one is a coarse threaded screw. We want the coarse threaded screw. So I'm running back into the same problem where I just don't know which way this has to be shifted. So I'm going to rotate this towards me. Sometimes when I do this for the camera, I'm working backwards, and that's great when I can. All right, there it is. Did you hear it? Mm-hmm. Now it just aligned. So that one I had to pull away at this corner. The middle stayed aligned the whole time, and then this one had to go forward. So the board was kind of trapezoidal, the way that it was sitting. It was on a bit of an angle.
That's cattywampus. Yeah.
It's cattywampus. I'm sorry, I used the wrong technical term. Yeah,
See, and that went right in. Yeah.
Yep. So don't force it. Don't use brute force. Don't get angry.
No. If you need light, get a flashlight or a headband
or a headband
light.
Wait for a minute. Then we have the last 3 screws. One right down here. And you'll see I just let that one tighten. I'm going to just go ahead and tighten these 3 because with the other 6 lined up, I don't think it's possible for these to not be lined up. So I don't have to worry about having to shift the board anymore. Ooh, that's a tight squeeze in there. You hear my screwdrivers automatically shutting off when it hits that torque setting of 3. And that is all the motherboard needs. It doesn't have to be super tight to the case. It just needs to be secured so that it won't come free in shipping or in moving the case around. So this is the the 8-pin power connector that's been the part of discussion. It's going to fit right up into this corner. And just kind of feed it in there. And then I'll come in here. There's clips on one side. Those clips are going to go to the outer edge of the board on this motherboard. Your board may be different.
Once you get it on, you can show them.
Yeah, so that's on now. The two 4-pin connectors are pushed together. Clips on the outside, that gets pushed on. We will not use that 4-pin additional. Again, that is optional and we don't need it on this build. It will not benefit the end user in how they are going to use this computer since they are not overclocking, they're not technical people like that. And then later, we'll do the cable management. We'll get this tied up off to the side like that. So the cabling will look really good. But that's furthest from our concern at this point. These are all the front port umbilicals, the power switch, reset switch, the audio, front port audio for headphones and microphone jack are all contained in here. And that can actually go, go right in there. This power supply is a little short, so we have a little gap. And the reason I tuck it in there is it's got to go all the way into this corner of the board. So the more I can get it closer to that, the easier the cable is hidden. And there'll be one of these connectors. You can refer to your motherboard manual, or you can look real closely at the printing on the board. It'll say like FP audio, like front panel audio, or F audio for front audio. It's got a tooth missing, and it's got an area here that's blocked so that it can only go on in the direction of the missing tooth. If you flip it the other way around, that blocked port will prevent one of the pins from seating, and the connector will not go on. So that's how they make sure you put it on with the right side up. Now that's not fully on right now. This is a friction fit, and it requires 2 hands. I have to put the flashlight there, but I've got to wiggle and push until it bottoms out against the board. There's no clip or anything. It's just held in by friction. It's just a tight fit. But that's all we needed to do to activate or to utilize the front microphone and headphone jack with that one cable that did that for us. Same with the USB. There's one cable. It's this thick ribbon cable here. And then that'll go somewhere around there, right in this area. Come around here and look. And you'll see it says USB 3.0 right there. It has a little notch, so it only goes in one direction. Again, there's no clip. You just sort of wiggle and push, and sometimes you can hear it click, other times not. Give it a light tug and it should just stay on. It's really not a good design. Then we got this big connector right here. That's the big motherboard power connector, which is this big monster here. And again, it's going to have a clip on one side. The clip always goes towards the edge of the board on this connector for all boards. We'll run it out through this hole just to keep the cabling looking clean. And we're going to bring that up, right up through here. How do I want to do that? Maybe something like that. And then these two go together.
Let me have the flashlight. And when you go to put it on,
Yeah, it's pretty dark in here. I think this is the part that intimidates people the most, but if you just deal with one cable at a time, I think you'll find if the cable fits, it's the right cable.
Just take your time.
Yeah, take your time and watch the videos, watch a different, we've got different videos showing different types of close-ups and the angles and lighting.
Now
that are better than this.
Now that can only go on one way, right?
Yes.
Because that has a clip.
It has a clip. And these square, if you look inside of these, they look square, but some of them are not square. Some of them have little corners cut off of them. And that makes sure that they won't go on the other way. But it's pretty subtle. You have to really study that. But yeah, there's a little ridge right here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's going to hold that clip on. So it does require a little bit of
Dexterity, yeah.
Yeah, I wish this 4-pin connector was attached permanently by now, because the reason they do this is back in about 20 years ago, motherboards took a 20 pin, and they're trying to be backwards compatible with this obsolete hardware. I don't know of any modern motherboards that only use a 20. They all use 24 now.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, power supply manufacturers should just make this a 24 permanent, so you don't have to fight so much with it to get it to align. And normally I would do this with the case laying flat. It's a little more difficult,
Yeah.
you know, upright, and certainly while it's rotating on me.
Yeah.
But I've seated it in there, and now I have to push it until it clicks in. There it is. And if I give it a light tug, it's not coming off.
Right.
So that's given the board power.
Okay.
All right, we've given the US front port USB is hooked up. The front port audio is hooked up. Now we have the front switches, which would be power, reset, and then the hard drive LED, power LED. And then finally put the heatsink on and we're ready to do our
Smoke
test
test.
fire. Yeah. So in the motherboard box here is that Q connector if we want to use it. Or what do they call it? The G connector. ASUS calls it a Q connector, Gigabyte calls it a G connector. And in this package there's this little plastic adapter. And what you can do, you don't have to do this, it's purely optional, but the concept here is to make your life easier. Now, if the case manufacturers would just all agree that, you know, with the motherboard manufacturers, that the cables are all going to go in this order, which most of them have done, then they could just make this all one connector right from the case manufacturer. But what this is going to do is this is going to tell you where to align those power switch, reset switch, hard drive LED, power LED, those last 4 wires we've got coming around this side. So what I want to do is separate these cables out so they're not interwoven with each other. And here it says power LED positive and negative. So on each one of these cables, at the end of it, it's labeled. And you'll see this one says right here. Just ignore these other cables. We just want to focus on this one. This says power LED positive and negative, and you see they've split. They're not one, usually it's one connector for a lot of it, but the power LED, they split it. And if we turn this the other side, power LED, positive cable, they want the positive side closest to the edge. So, if you look, you see how the positive is on your right, so that when I put it in this connector, that positive lines up with that positive closest to the edge. It seats down in here. If I push down hard enough on it, it should slide in. And it should lock into place. Really not that hard. PW is the power switch. So power switch will align with PW. We'll get it lined up in there. And then we will lock that in. Now we're going to go around to the other side. And the hard drive LED, again with the positive closest to the edge. So we'll, at the remaining 2 cables, look for the one that says hard drive LED. It doesn't say positive or negative, but there is a little tiny arrow indicated. You gotta look very closely to see it, and that's your positive side. So in that case, basically make sure the words HDD LED are facing out, and it just goes in, and that will align the positive closest to the edge. And then that just locks in. And then the last one, that's just pretty obvious, that's gonna be the reset switch. If I can grab it, here it is. And then it says RES, positive, negative. Remember, switches don't have positive or negative, so I don't know why they do that. And we'll just slide the switch in, we'll slide the connector in, and it locks down. See, I pulled it and it came out, which means it wasn't installed correctly. I'm always pulling on these when I think they're seated, gently, to make sure. The other half of this connector, on both sides, we don't use that half. We only use this half. Now we can feed that in right through here. Bring this case around this way. And in this corner, it's just going to align with the wires coming out of the left side. And you just kind of wiggle and push. And that's just hooked up all 4 of those wires. And if we ever have to work on this in the future, we just pull that single connector off. We don't have to pull each of those 4 wires off. Finally, we can get the heatsink installed, and then we can do our test fire. You know, well, I've got the case in this position with you holding the camera. Let me grab the fine threaded screws here and just secure that DVD drive. I got to do it later anyway, so. And I just need 2, one for each side of the optical drive, just to lock it in. So if you look up here, Mitch, you'll see there's 2 holes. I don't want it in both. Just one or the other. So here I'm going to go just right there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm pretty OCD. If I use the bottom hole, then I use the bottom hole on both sides. I can't even use anything but the bottom hole on this side. So if I had put it in the top hole, even though it really doesn't matter, I would have go to the other side and move it so that they're both the same.
But that locks in the optical drive.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, it was locked in
Didn't it?
before, but it's
Anyway.
definitely not going to go anywhere. No matter how they handle it in shipping, it's not going anywhere. Here, look at me. We have a talk for a minute, you and I.
Okay.
There's a lot of discussion about how you apply thermal compound. I want to let you in on a little engineering secret. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. This obsession with thermal compound is redundant, irrelevant, and completely accomplishes nothing. It doesn't help anybody. What's important is you have a nice thin layer of thermal material between the top of the CPU heat spreader and the bottom of your cooler, whether it's a liquid cooler or air cooler, doesn't matter. The point of this is to be almost like a butter or a coating of paint. And its purpose is to fill in all the microscopic nooks and crannies between the 2 metal surfaces so that they're making as complete of contact as possible for the most heat transference. If you put on too little, you don't get all those nooks and crannies filled. It's defeating its purpose. If you put on too much, then you're interfering with the connection between those 2 surfaces, which defeats its purpose. The good news is there's a pretty large barrier that exists in the middle. Too little is too little, and too much is clearly too much. When it oozes out the sides, it's too much. Way too much. When you look at the CPU, if the whole CPU is not covered, then it's too little. So how do you know if it's too much or too little if you're using a squishing method or you can't see through it? You're just using faith. I guess if it oozes out the sides, you use too much. If it doesn't ooze out the sides, maybe it's enough. So I don't like maybes. I like peace of mind. And so what I do, and the way I apply my thermal compound, is I take a little bit of it and dab it about like that. And you'll see we still have a lot left in this tube. And I'm going to use the nitrile glove, which is completely clean. There's no dust, or you don't want to use a bare finger because you've got skin oils, and this stuff is really hard to get off your skin on top of that interfere with the efficacy of this material to transfer the heat. So you want to keep it free of contamination. And that includes dust, dirt, hair, oil, fingerprints. And people go, oh, you're going to create air bubbles with that. Well, if you just tap on it like this and you create all these little mountains and valleys, they're all going to get squished down. And guess what? You won't have any air bubbles.
You know, I never had any crannies that had nooks. I'm just saying, you know.
It's not what I read on the internet.
Okay, yeah.
I saw some videos.
So that's smooth, you know, you would consider that's just the right amount right there.
Yeah, it's not too much, it's not too little.
little.
It's like a single coating of paint. I don't want to be able to read through it. I don't want to see through it. But I also don't want it dripping.
Right.
And I don't want it so thick that it's about to drip.
Okay.
And then because you see my glove, that would be hard to wash off if that was on my skin. It would probably be on me for 3 days.
Right.
So I can take the glove and I can fold it in on itself, and it just keeps it off the furniture. It's clean.
Yeah.
and this will just go in the trash.
Dispose of properly,
Yeah.
boom.
Now, if you want to use any other method, here, look at me for a
Yeah.
second. If you want to use any other method to apply your thermal compound, if you say,
Yeah.
I don't care the way you do
Right.
it, Carey, I like to make the dot and squish. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Do
Some
that.
people still use your Scotch tape method, to
do
be
that.
honest, yeah.
However you want to do it.
Yeah.
The important thing is how you get here.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care how you get here, but you need to have complete coverage on the CPU for the optimal cooling. It doesn't make sense to me that people they obsess over this and then they do it wrong. And they can't see it because once your cooler's in place, it's not transparent. You cannot see how much coverage you've got. But I don't care. I honestly don't care. You need to use thermal compound. You need to use the right amount, which again is varying. It's not like there's a single right amount. There's too little, there's too much, and then there's a great big middle, right? And how you wish to, do a little X or a little pattern or little dots, and you want to squish it or you want to spread it, I don't care. Doesn't matter. Test it yourself, you'll see it doesn't matter. So with that in place, I'm going to lower the case down so that I can set the heatsink on top. And this is a large heatsink we've got here. There's the fan we're going to be using in a moment. And there's the cooler. And then that's all that's left in this box. It's a heck of a deal for less than 50 bucks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it is. Now, if you look at this cooler, you'll see one side kind of sticks out. One screw sticks out. And that's the screw that's going to go towards the RAM. Then this screw here, the way we have to get through it is through a hole on top of the heatsink. It's important you put this on in the right direction or it can interfere with your RAM or it could interfere with the installation of other parts. So
Let me go around here.
on the bottom
Very important.
on the bottom here, there's tape that's got to come off. It's important that this stays clean.
Okay.
I've had people who build their own computers, and I've done it myself, we forget to take this little piece of tape off. And your system's going to run a little warm. So if you care about your cooling, you want to leave that tape on until you're ready to install.
Luckily, you had viewers to tell you the one time that you left it on in the comments, and then you're like, oh, I think I did, and you pulled it off.
Yeah, if I misspeak, if I use the wrong terminology, there are people just ready to jump on me and make me aware. So anyway, so that screw that juts out.
Show them the two holes where the screws are going to go in.
Right here on one and right here on the other side.
Okay.
This is our RAM, so that side that sticks out.
Here, let me wedge this. So.
Yeah, please do. Jam it in there.
Okay.
Good,
Yeah,
thank
okay.
you. This is just gonna, so we only put thermal compound on the CPU. We do not put it on the heatsink.
Okay.
Only that gets thermal compound.
Yep.
Never mix two thermal compounds together. If you don't have enough, you gotta wipe it clean and use it different. Don't mix two different thermal compounds. Don't apply thermal compound to both the heatsink and the CPU, only to the CPU, so that is completely clean. If you look at the bottom of this heatsink, it is completely polished and clean and free of any detritus.
Okay.
I'm gonna set it down.
Big words. All right.
Yeah, big words. Like abbreviation. Think about that. Why is that such a big word? All right, so with that sitting gently in place, I can grab the screwdriver that came with the cooler. And that's why this screwdriver is so important, because it's got to be able to fit down through this hole. And we can start to get this tightened up. But don't screw it down too much, because you still have to get to the other side. This side's much easier to access. There we go. And we just keep going back and forth, turning a couple of times. And then come around. So we have nice, even, flat surface. If you tighten up one side way too much, it's going to be sideways. You may not be able to tell with a human eye that you're not sitting flush. You'll just have high temps that don't make any sense. Most things that don't make any sense is due to a lack of understanding. Don't blame the thing, blame your understanding. Go after the education instead of the, conclusion that it's junk. So these screws come to a dead stop. It's not like you have to worry about how far can you tighten them. they absolutely come to a dead stop. And you'll see that's why the screwdriver is so perfect, because when I place it down in here, what are the odds that you have a screwdriver that's going to be long enough and narrow enough? So that's why they include it. And of course, you can use this for anything. It doesn't have to be computer related. So keep it. You don't have to throw it away when you're done. Finally, we put the fan on, which I have here. And this fan, and I've talked about this before, where these support brackets are is the side that air is coming out. And this other side that has the center that's spinning right here, see that center doesn't spin because the motor is there. This center spins. This is what's sucking air in or pulling air in. I want all my airflow to go from the front of the case to the back. The fan that's already with this computer case right here, can you see that, Mitch? You see that's the side there that spins, so it's drawing air in and it's spitting it out the back. We want to keep that airflow moving in that direction. So just repeat, however that fan's installed, this fan gets installed the same way. And the way these fans install is pretty clever. I wasn't a fan of this. Did I just say I wasn't a fan of the... All right, never mind. So it's a fan, and I was not a fan of this mounting technique because to me it's not as secure as a screw, but I've yet to have a problem with it. And so what I'm going to do is take these wire hanging brackets, whatever you want to call them, and just place them into the holes on one side. And what I'm thinking of is this fan's going to go on this way, and this power cable's got to come out of the bottom to go towards the motherboard. And I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Again, I don't know how well you're going to see this, but I'll try and do it backwards for you. This just goes in this hole here on the front. And the same thing over here, right? And when I get this installed, it's going to be hard for me to get my fingers in here to wire tie this wire, so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to get rid of the wire tie and put on 2 nylon zip ties right now. You can come around here if you want, Mitch. Let me go grab 2 zip ties, which came with the case, and some wire cutters, which I have here. And we're going to go just like this. Rid of that wire tie, and don't want that anywhere near. Cut the pigtails off the zip ties. And that's one less thing I got to worry about later. Now, when it comes to putting the fan onto the heatsink, there's a little groove that runs along the edge right here. Come over here for a second, Mitch. You see this groove right here? Right where my fingernail is, there's a groove. And this fan bracket's going to sit right in there. You stay there, I'm going to come over here. There's also, right on the top, there's little grooves as well. That helps you to align the fan to where it needs to be. And I can actually plug this fan in right now, I think. Or can I? That goes down on the motherboard connector. We've got other better shots of this on other videos. And I don't really know that it's helping me to do this now. It only goes on one direction, and it's it'll say CPU fan on the motherboard, and in your documentation we'll highlight that one particular fan connector specifically for your CPU fan, which is often monitored by the BIOS and controlled by the BIOS to speed up or slow down as your CPU gets hotter or cooler, to keep your system as quiet and as cool as possible. So it's important you use the right fan header for your CPU fan. Now, with regards to the rest of this here, this, I realize I might have not done this cable management right. The cable's kind of getting in my way now. So I think what I'm going to do is take that off. I'm going to do this right up. I want to bring the fan as low as it will go, seated into the grooves on the heatsink here. That looks pretty darn good. And I'm going to grab the wire hanger. And I'm going to pull it. And it'll lock right in.
Into that notch.
Yeah, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Now, I will say, this is a little more difficult when the motherboard's installed in the case, but given a choice of either doing this or trying to get that cable on with this in the way,
Right.
I'll take this. This side is just going to require a little more, you know, I may not be standing in the best place to be doing this.
Yeah, go ahead and switch if you need to.
I'm a bit stubborn once I've started it. I feel like, feel committed. I should be able to just grab the lever, pull it back. That locks it in. Now I can grab the power cable, plug it back in, and the cable management should be fine now. If you've got large hands, this is going to be very difficult for some people, but it's a combination of this case and this heatsink. It's not for you know, every computer build. But if you're going to follow these exact parts, this is going to be one of those areas where it's just going to be a tight fit. That should be it. What do you think, Mitch? Is it going to work?
Drum roll, please.
Flip the switch on. I'm going to flip us over to input 2, which is going to say no signal. Okay, so that's normal. We have 1,173 people watching us right now, and I don't have a monitor. You notice that? There's nothing. There's no screen that I'm plugged into, because I want to use your screen. Yeah, you. If you're watching this video,
Your screen.
I'm going to use your screen. So I've got this hooked up to 1,172 screens right now. Watch, I'll show you.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me borrow your screen. So I'm going to put us up in the corner, Mitch. And I'm going to turn the computer on. Or why don't you do it? Why don't you do the honors? And then people should see this, the fans turn when you get it fired up.
Is it the circly or the other one? Doesn't matter what
It's
side.
the one closest to the edge. There you go. So the lights come on, the fan is turning. Give it a few seconds, give it up to a minute, and let's see what happens here. We should get some signal from the computer. Right now the computer is not sending a signal. Here we go.
And you think it might go right into BIOS once it
Yeah, it's
does
gonna,
its thing,
so
yeah,
it, like it
yeah.
recognized something, it reset
Set
itself.
itself.
It may do that a couple of times. This is normal, let it be. And in just a moment here,
It should, I guess, default right in there to the BIOS, you think?
yeah, I think it's gonna go right into the BIOS, usually. So now it's reset itself 3 times. This is all
Don't,
normal.
yeah, don't panic. Don't
Yep.
think you've done something wrong.
4 times. And
there
right
you
into
go.
the BIOS. Now it says the BIOS version is F10.
I thought that was the latest one. Didn't you just build with,
This is the Pro Wi-Fi,
yeah.
and I'm showing the latest is a F11.
Oh,
So I'm going to extract the BIOS file that was provided by, Al has provided me a link for that. And I'm going to put that on a flash drive using a streaming computer. You guys can't see what I'm doing. But I've got a little flash drive here that I use specifically for this purpose. And I always keep it empty. And the only thing I'm going to put on there is the BIOS file. I don't need anything else. I don't need the AutoExec.bat or the eFlash file or anything else that is part of the download. Just need the main F11 BIOS. And now that I've got that, it's here on this flash drive right here. What I can do is now plug it in to a USB port back here. Any USB port should do the job. Sometimes you've got to reboot the system. Sometimes you don't. So we'll go over here to where it says, excuse me, it says Q flashes, press F8. And then it says update BIOS in yellow. That's the highlighted option, so I push enter. You can see, it does see it. So it sees see how the file name ends in F11? That's coming off of that flash drive. So I just point the mouse over to that, you can click on it, double click on it, and it's verified the file, and it says, do you want to do a fast or an intact? And you see how intact is yellow? That's the default. So we can click or hit enter, and we're updating the BIOS right now. That's really not a big deal.
Now this will self reboot. You don't have to hit the.
Yeah, I'm not touching. Not touching you. Yeah, it's all. Just be patient. It just happens all by itself. You can see our CPU fan, which it knows based on where we plugged it in on the motherboard is the CPU fan. Up here in the corner, it says BIOS version F11. That's our latest BIOS. And I'm done with this flash drive, so I can unplug it. I will erase it, so it'll be available for another board for another day. So I've just turned this off. I'm going to take this Windows 10 flash drive, plug it into one of the blue USB ports because they're faster, and that is a $20 16 gig flash drive. You know, 16 gig flash drive should be like $5. Yeah, a slow one. Yeah. That's a fast one. Yeah. And I want my install to happen fast. So I'm going to turn the machine back on, and it should automatically scan for any bootable device right now. And if we wait, the only thing it can boot from is that flash drive. It's going to figure that out here in a moment.
And you'll see the magic circle.
There it is. So that's going to start the Windows 10 installation process. If we had more than one storage device, I would not be plugging those in right now, or it gets really confusing over
as to which one
do you want to install Windows on. So when you first build your computer, if you have more than one storage device, only plug in the main one that you intend to boot from, get Windows 10 installed, then disconnect power and hook up your other storage devices. You might even want to do those one at a time so that you get the drivelers associated.
Right. I recommend one at a time.
Yeah, because if you put in three, then all of a sudden it's D, E, and F, and the optical drive may already be taking up D, so now you have E, F, and G. You've got to move all the letters around. So you don't have to. Right. But if you have OCD like me,
you want everything.
I want all my hard drive storage to be the first letters, my optical storage to be the next letter, and any solids like memory card readers, anything after that. And then any map network drives I take down to the opposite end, starting at Z and working my way the other way. So we're going to go with all the defaults here. We'll just hit next and install now.
And this should be fast.
Yes, this should be one of the fastest installs of Windows 10 you've ever seen. I never ever install a product key during install, only after install. So right down here it says I don't have a product key. That installs your trial of Windows 10, which will run indefinitely without activation. It just prevents certain customizations. And it's all for free. It's only when you want to activate Windows that you have to pay for it. So here we want Windows 10 Pro. Usually when you enter your product key, it knows automatically which version of Windows is that for. Because I'm not giving it a product key, I have to know.
Right.
If I put in the wrong version of Windows, my product key is not going to work, and I'll have to start over again with the right version, right? Or I have to buy a new product key. So anyway, all my product keys are Windows 10 Pro. I hit next, and it's going to come up with the end user license agreement here in a moment. You don't have a choice but to accept the terms. Then it's going to say, do you want to do an upgrade or a custom? I always choose custom. And it says where. Well, there's only one place it can go. That's the 2 terabyte Intel 660p NVMe drive. And so all I have to do is hit next. And it's going to automatically partition, automatically format, and automatically install Windows. Can you hear the system at all?
No, it's dead quiet.
We got the power supply fan running and the CPU fan running. I'm not going to hook up the front case fan because it's not needed without a graphics card. There's no point in it. I will hook up the rear fan, but it won't make any more noise than it's making right now. Now it's going to automatically restart, and it will automatically restart from the M.2 drive now, rather than from the flash drive, because the BIOS, by default, if you leave it alone, goes through a certain order. It's only when people go in there and they start disabling things that they're like, oh, after I updated, I can't access my drive anymore, because they modified it. So I'm here to show you live on video that that just simply doesn't occur if you set up the computer correctly, as I'm demonstrating. If you don't, then you have to deal with those things you don't see me have to deal with because you did it differently than I showed you. So here we go. Finalizing this, we have United States is our region. US is our keyboard layout. We don't have a secondary keyboard layout, so we skip that. Now it sees the Wi-Fi. It's already loaded the drivers, and it's saying, let's connect. What you want to look for in Microsoft is the fine print at the bottom corners of the screen. So in this case, it says, I don't have internet, because they don't know if those Wi-Fi points are mine.
Right.
And it says, but there's so much more to see. Yeah. Like, what did I say? Back in this little print. Yeah.
So
the
that's
limited setup.
So that's now limited. Twice. You've gotten the one. This is now the second one.
Yeah. And then it says, all right, who's going to use it? I can put the name user in here and hit enter, and then leave the password blank. Customer can set that up if they want to or not. It's not like it's really securing anything. Now it says, do you want to activate the history? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And the digital assistant, I don't want that. And I turn off everything but location services, so I just disable all this telemetry stuff. And the customer can change all this back. It's all in the control panel. But I'll leave location on because that'll help us to set the time zone and stuff. Everything else is good. It's obtaining an IP address, and it says, let's finish setting up your computer. Like we were finished. No, we're not. So just so you can see what's behind the video. It's asking if we want the computer resources to be available on the network. I don't. And it says, well, let's finish up. There's no way to cancel this. All there is an OK button. So I hit OK, and now it wants me to go back and create a Microsoft account. Remember what I said, fine print, at the bottom of the screen, often in the corners. Skip for now. Now, how many times do you think I'm going to have to tell it?
Twice at least. So that's one.
Oh, looks like once was all it took. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Now, when we have internet access, we'll go to Windows Update, and we can grab all the updates. There you go.
Well, we'll see how many more updates after this.
We should be about done with the updates.
Yeah.
We'll check one way. Just keep repeating this until there's no more updates. Yep, we're up to date. Now what I can do, I like to optimize Windows. I like the certain settings. And so I have this little software program written by Nick Shaw over at d7xtech.com. You can buy this program for $10, but it's nothing you can't do step by step by hand. There's no magic in it. But what it does for me is it does it very, very quickly, and it ensures that I don't forget anything. So it's not only faster, but it's consistent. Yeah. And it's called Uncle Carey's Windows 10 Optimizer. It's $10. Icon. Here it is. Just drag that out here.
Again, you're talking, it does all these processes in less than a minute.
Oh, it's quick, and it's consistent. So it analyzes the system. It sees what's not optimized yet and recommends it. And it'll, like these settings in the power plan change when it detects you have a battery. So therefore you have a laptop. That's disabling indexing. You'll see a lot of like access denied stuff for files that are in use. It's normal and it's fine. And then for these settings to take effect, you've got to reboot. The link for Uncle Carey's Windows 10 Optimizer is in the video notes below the video. It's just a download. It's $10. And anytime we update it, you get your updates for free, but you have to go and grab the updates. You have to look for updates. So if I go back and run this again, it says everything's already optimized. You don't have to run it. But maybe I want to undo some of the optimizations. I can right-click and to choose to undo them. And I can go up here to options. There's only one option, and that's to check for updates. And it'll make sure that we're running the latest version. And I always recommend you run it off the desktop. Some people, they try and update it off the flash drive and then it fails. And I'll talk to Nick about it. I don't know why it does that. So I always run it off the desktop, and then when I'm done, I just delete it. And there's no activation on it. You can run it on as many machines as you want. You can run it on all your friends' computers. All I'm asking you is you don't give it out. Because if you give it out, then it's taking $10 potentially from me. Let them buy their own copy, you know, if for no other reason than just be cool to me. But as long as you're using your copy, you can use it on every computer you ever see.
Yep.
So doesn't bother me one bit. And that's why there's no activation, there's no serial number, because I don't want to do that.
Anything else on this machine besides, you know, your wire tie or your, you know, cable management? That
Well, again, we've got to hook the optical drive's got to get hooked up. The rear case fan's got to be plugged in. The cable management has to be done. And there's some Intel SSD software which we can download. So if we bring up the browser, and usually I'll change the browser homepage to Google and the search engine to Google. So I'll do that later. It's not really an optimization, that's more of a preference. But if we go to Google and we'll type in Intel SSD Toolbox, it's a free download. You'll see that the SSD didn't come with any software or instructions. It says download Intel Solid State Drive Toolbox. That's what we want. The firmware, if there's a firmware update, it's part of the toolbox. It doesn't go online and check. So if you're not running the latest toolbox, then you'll say, oh, I never have a firmware update. So from time to time, you want to make sure that you've got, like this is 3.5.11 or whatever. You want to make sure that, like that came out in May of this year. That's a zip file. Here's the executable file. We'll just accept the license terms and run it. And I'll show you what this looks like. It's very different from Samsung Magician. All right, let's install the SSD toolbox. And we'll run the software. When you have a solid state drive, it's important that you, in order to maintain your performance, it gets trimmed, what we call a trim. Now Windows 10 will do this automatically, but nothing beats getting it directly from the manufacturer. So if you look through here, we have a number of options. So you see it's got a quick diagnostic scan over here.
Okay.
It takes about 3 minutes. I don't really need it. It's a brand new drive.
Right.
There's a full diagnostic. Some things are kind of weird. There's a secure erase, which is never really secure despite what they say. There's the firmware update. It says the updates are included in this version of the software.
Okay.
We can check for updates right down here. We're running 3511. Go up here to Intel SSD Optimizer, the very top thing.
Okay.
And it says, optimize Intel SSDs using trim function. Latest firmware must be installed for this tool. Check firmware update to make sure. Intel recommends running the Intel SSD Optimizer once a week. Now it's a brand new drive, there's really nothing on it. We can run it, we can schedule it. So you can click schedule and add this. And this is an important one, to clear the internal cache of the solid state drive after a period of time to boost its performance. And it only takes a moment, and you'll see that it'll get to 100% here momentarily. There's nothing in the cache right now, very little. But after the customer has this for a while, if they start noticing a decrease in performance, this would be some of the steps you might follow to bring that performance back with a solid state drive. And that's true of all solid state drives. How the manufacturers provide you this, or if they, like AData doesn't seem to provide this, I could be wrong. Certainly Samsung does, obviously Intel does, and I'm not sure about other manufacturers. SanDisk has their own little toolbox. It generally does not come bundled with the drive. You've got to go to the manufacturer's website to see what tools are available, and generally they don't hurt anything by having them. Now, without running any of these tools, Windows 10 will take care of it at a minimal level. You'll see that just took a little longer to run than I thought, but it just takes a moment. And then I can dismiss one drive, dismiss account protection. There we go. That's still running in the background. All right, guys, so let's turn this machine off. Let's do this. Let's wrap this up for right now because we've pretty much done what we need to do. And of course, to everybody who tuned in and watched, thanks you guys for being a part of this community. And we look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon.
Yeah.